It's important to get out on these COVID days. It's October here in Riverside, but it's still real warm. We don't really get cool weather till the end of December. Then it warms up in the beginning of January. Hey everyone, I'm just doing a little bit of hiking around and I figured I'd shoot another little video. Probably, I can't do these short. Every time I think, oh, I'll just do it for like 5 minutes. It ends up being for like half an hour. So I'll keep this one short because when I get to the end of the trail, I'll shut up. I want to talk about exponential growth, and it's something that is very prevalent in our world now with COVID, but it's super counterintuitive. And this has actually been something on my mind a long time because like technology, it's how people miss technology, is exponential growth. Flies. When I was a kid in school, there was this this math problem that I remember because it's so counterintuitive, and it's someone wants to hire you and they'll pay you either, let's say $500 a day, which is like a lot of money, or they'll pay you 1 cent the first day, and then they'll double it to 2 cents the second day, and then 4 cents, and then 8 cents, and then 16, and it just keeps doubling every day you work. And I think they were going to hire you for like 2 months or something. And you think to yourself like, well, $500 a day is a lot. Like, each day, you work for a week doing the doubling, I think you haven't even made $1. You work for a week doing the other way, you've made $2,500. And it seems very counterintuitive that doubling would ever like really pay off. It'd ever become very much, but it does. And the immediate business prospect of this linear growth, $500 a day, sounds really, really good. And the exponential, well, you don't really see it because it's so small. And no one's ever going to give you such an employment prospect because, eventually you're making $1 million, and then the next day $2 million, and the next day $4 million. But with a lot of things in our world, it's kind of the case. And I think like this is something I noticed a lot of people are getting wrong with the COVID. When the early stages of COVID, when it hit the United States back in March, I made a calculation, was how long did it take for the number of cases to double? And if the number of cases were doubling at the time, the number of deaths were doubling. And a lot of people just thought, oh, well, it's killing 4 people a day. And then, a couple days later kills 8 people or whatever, something along those lines. And what they didn't see was that it was doubling, and that it would very quickly go from 8 to 16 to 32 to 64 to 128 to 256 to 512. I just know those numbers because those are binary numbers. But there's something like super counterintuitive about it, because it's just when it's small, yeah, it'll double a whole lot, and it's easy to miss it. It looks linear. It looks like it's doing this, and then out of nowhere it does this. And the other place where we see it is technology, and like Moore's law is essentially doubling. And there were these investors in the early 90s when the internet was started. They noticed the number of people on the internet was doubling like I think it was every week or 2 weeks or something. It was this ridiculous growth, but it was still a very small number of people. But it's like, hey, if you're going to invest in a company that has this ridiculous growth, even if it's very small, you invest early. You invest before it gets big, before it's the next big thing. Hopefully the microphone's not in my face. These flies are liking me for some reason. But it's super counterintuitive. It makes no sense, like intuition, like that whole math problem I gave you, or that was given to me anyway, where you start off with a penny and then you double it every day. Well, after 7 days, if I remember, it's 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. So after about 8 days, you're making more than 100 times as much as you were. So a good way to think about it is every 8 days you multiply it by 100. So you go from a penny, and then 8 days later you're making $1. It's actually $1.28. We'll just call it $1. And then 8 days later you're making $100. Well, then 8 days after that you're making $10,000 a day. And 8 days after that, you're making $1 million every day. It gets out of hand really fast. And so something that a piece of math that I kind of used was I realized, hey, it goes from 1% to 100% as quick as it goes from 1/100th of a percent to 1%. And I was able to kind of use that to kind of deduce that in April we're gonna have a really high fatality rate for COVID. And it's I hate using this math that I normally use for geeky, nerdy computer stuff to kind of realize hey, this thing's spreading really fast. Oh, what have we here? What have we here? I don't know if you guys remember, but this is my little hiking trail that I almost got bit by a snake on. Mask, by the way. You should mask up. I'm not around anyone else, so I'm safe. And I'm not just me getting sick, but if I am sick, I won't get anyone else sick, that's the goal. I don't want anyone to suffer because of a decision I make. But anyway, this doubling math, it can kind of show how something can start super, super small and within a very short period of time be 100 times larger than it is, and then 100 times larger than that. And that's why we're seeing COVID now in these states that have kind of avoided it. They're seeing small little outbreaks all over the place, but it's way bigger than it was a week ago. And if countermeasures aren't taken, which I'm worried they're not going to be taken, but I think they are, but I'm worried that people in those communities aren't going to do it because they're sick of the countermeasures. We could see what happened in New York City or the Grand Princess Cruise Line very quickly. My first piece of data that I used for COVID was the Grand Princess Cruise Line, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, so please look me up. It was somewhere between 0.1 and 0.2% of all of everyone on the boat died of COVID within a very short period of time. And that's how quickly it spread. And it was spreading without any mitigation. They should have stopped it. They should have gotten the health people off. They should have quarantined everyone, blah, blah, blah. We have all this hindsight, but we can kind of see what happens in a worst case scenario. And that worst case scenario happened also in parts of the country that had a very early outbreak in April, and those were the New York City area. If I can recall, about 8,000 people in Kings County, New York, which is the Brooklyn area, have died from COVID. That's really sad. My county is just a population just a bit smaller, and we've had about 1,200, 1,300 somewhere. I think it was 1,200 the last time I looked, maybe 1,300 by now. But if we use Kings County, the tragedy that happened in Kings County and parts of New Jersey and New York, as kind of this is how bad it can get, we can expect 7,000 people dead here. And when I was running these numbers, like I say, I'm not a statistician. I've never really done a whole lot of biology. I'm just looking at these straight doubling sequences because they seem to be pretty reliable. And if we look at the worst case scenarios where they did play out, it's kind of what happened. And that's the Grand Princess Cruise Line and then parts of New York City, Kings County. And what does it mean for the rest of the country? And I don't want to make this totally political, I have all the answers, I'm so smart, I figured it all out. But if you use these pieces of data and kind of extrapolate them out to a much larger chunk of the pie, it's probably going to be about 700,000 dead. And that's pretty bad. 1% would be 3.3 million. 0.1% would be 330,000. So 0.2%, about 600,000. And that's just using the data from all these other places. Well, if we get it as bad as the bad places have gotten it, that's kind of what we're looking at. And there's no, maybe someone can correct me, there's no true mechanism, which we're not immune to it. It's not like they were vulnerable and we're immune. The reality is we're all vulnerable as a population. I mean, individuals are, most individuals will be fine, but in terms of spreading it through, it could be pretty bad. So what this like really means is like math can be scary. You know, when we were kids in class, we were thinking, oh, what does this have to do with anything? And you know, when am I ever going to apply this? When am I ever going to need to know this parabolic curve or these exponential growth curves or logarithmic plots? Like, when will that ever be relevant? And we're starting to see it's very relevant now, and not understanding this has led people to some very bad conclusions. Back in March, when I first noticed this, of course, many people who I knew, they were telling me I was kind of like full of shit, because there's no way that it can get 1,000 people a day. At the time, COVID didn't even kill 1,000 Americans, and you know, it took a while for that to happen. Here I'm saying it's going to be over 1,000 a day. Like, who the hell am I to know such a thing? But people were looking at the linear growth. They weren't looking at the exponential growth. They were looking at the $500 per day, not the penny per day doubling. And many of these people with great authority claimed that it was going to be 20 to 30,000 dead by the end of the year. Just because, hey, if it took a month to kill 1,000, and maybe it ramps up a little bit and we have 1,000 deaths a month, you know. It was in April, there was a 7-day rolling average for a significant part of the month where it was over 2,000 deaths per day, every day. 2,000 dead. It's like having two 9/11s every 3 days, basically. But that kind of led them to a very bad conclusion. They looked at and they did their research, but research is usually just some dipshit talking into a mic. And I'm some dipshit talking into a mic. I'm nobody. You don't need to listen to this as if I'm an authority. I'm saying that you should learn and understand exponential growth. So you can kind of look at this data and realize, like, yes, if this gets out of hand, like it has elsewhere, this is what the exponential growth is in your community. And maybe we're going to start to take these things a little more seriously. Maybe we'll take the social distancing more serious. You know, there was a party behind my house last night, and it's like they were having parties. Then we're wondering why it's spreading through certain communities. It's like, well, you know, having 20 people show up in a band, yeah, if one of you guys is sick, it's gonna spread. Then you take it home and spread it again. But anyway, that's kind of all I want to talk about. Like I say, I was hoping to get 5 minutes. It says I got 13. Is exponential growth is something you're taught as a kid, then you're wondering, when am I ever going to need to know how to understand this? And when is it ever relevant to anything? And exponential growth on the tech end has resulted in great wealth. People who saw the curve early and invested early are some of the wealthiest people today. And on the sad end, that people who don't understand exponential growth acted accordingly, and we've seen a viral outbreak that's killed, you know, as of now, I think well over 217,000 Americans. And there's nothing protecting everyone else. But anyway, that's kind of all I wanted to do. This is going to be a short little walk around video. I was hoping to make it like happy. I've actually been planning this exponential growth before COVID, where I just want to talk about how a technology can develop really fast and go from nothing to something significant in a very short period of time, like the internet, where in 1991 it was nothing, in 2000 people were becoming billionaires from it. And how that applies to things like driverless cars, where people see them and they think, oh, it's nothing, and yeah, I can drive, but not all that well. And not realizing, hey, exponential growth in 7 generations is going to be 100 times better, and a generation maybe once every couple months. I think maybe 6 months. So it's going to be 100 times better in 3 years. And it's hard to mentally process that. So anyway, I've gone on too long. So anyway, thank you for watching. I'm trying to make these videos more often. Follow me on Instagram, Riley O'Neill. Subscribe to the channel. If I get more subscribers, I'll post more stuff. But I'm going to post more stuff anyway. But if I get subscribers, I definitely will. So anyway, thank you for watching. Stay safe, everyone.